leading up to draft night, and we saw a deal go down yesterday, kind of spilling over into today with Kristaps Porzingis being dealt and heading to the Celtics, part of a three-player trade and a three-team trade, rather. And we can certainly talk about that as the show moves along. But you wanted to start with something else today, and I feel like this is a sure sign that summer is upon us.
Yes,
with the topic that we are planning to start with today.
What if Syracuse played baseball? The Marshall Street podcast posted a question on their social media. Basically, a what if in Syracuse history. What if blank had happened?
Or had not happened,
yeah.
As the case may be in some instances.
What would the outcome have been? And the first one that came to my mind was like, what if they had just given Coach P that one more year? Right? Does football lose its complete, the program went into the dumpster? Does that happen if they give Coach P just that one more year on his contract and honor what they said going into the bowl game?
Before the bowl game,
that he was going to be the head coach?
Let me ask you this. Is that the biggest what if in that scenario, that if he had gotten the extra year, or is the what if they had hired someone different?
The what if is if I think, at that point, it was so late in the game.
Right, that's true.
I think it was more of what if they give him that one more year. And they do a real search.
Because here's the thing, I love Coach P, and I think the further we get removed from his tenure, I think more and more fans are coming around to.
Because what if it was a 6-6 year that year instead of the Greg Robinson first year?
Right. But then you're stuck in neutral, and ultimately you're saying you could have gotten ahead of it.
Stuck in neutral.
You're saying you could have gotten ahead of it, fired him earlier, or announced he's not coming back earlier, and then you have a better chance of landing the coach that you wanted.
Once they gave him
the vote of confidence,
yes, it should have stayed one more year.
Right, because you're right. It was so late in the game.
That completely ruined the football program.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. And again, what I was saying was I was prefacing it with I love Coach P, and I think they should have kept him around. But again, as we go back to that period in time, it had gotten stale, and there was a lot of 6-6s.
I take stale right now,
and losses to Temple and Rutgers, and there was a lot of discontent among the fan base and among the most loyal of supporters.
Do you know what our benchmark is right now, Steve? You know what we're saying right now?
I understand.
If they make it to another bowl game, that would be great. That could be 6-6. That could be stale and neutral.
Yes. I completely agree with you. And this goes back to our conversation, I don't know, 3-4 months ago about be careful what you wish for with the basketball program. You don't want to clean house, because if you clean house, there's that risk that, you think this is rock bottom, this is not rock bottom. And I think we saw that with the football program, right? It was not great. It was stale. Something needed to be done, but it wasn't rock bottom, because we saw what rock bottom was right after that.
Yeah, one more year of Coach P, I don't think would have killed anybody.
Right.
And it was a classy thing to do.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm playing devil's advocate that, I know.
Well, that's the thing. We have the benefit of hindsight now, and we can say, yeah, that was a horrible decision.
Well, yes. Who they hired turned out to be a horrible decision.
Well, it wasn't just that. It was
how it all
where they did it.
Yeah.
How they did it. When they did it.
They mismanaged that situation.
Yes.
I think we would all agree on that. And again, if you were going to part ways, do it before the bowl game. Give yourself a fighter's chance to get the coach in that you want. And they went with a guy who had no head coaching experience, and he brought in assistant coaches and put them in different positions that they had never served before, and it was a disaster, as we all know. That's a good example. The first one that comes to mind for me in terms of the biggest what ifs in SU history, it would have to be the Arinze injury in 2010 in the Big East Conference tournament, because I firmly believe, and I think you will find 99% of people in this town who agree that if he doesn't get hurt, they win the national title that year. And then Jim Boeheim's got 2 national titles as of 2010, and who knows what happens after that.
The problem I have with that is you don't know they would have won. Like,
you're right, but they
would
were
they have
the
beaten
best
Butler?
team.
Would they have beaten Duke?
I think they definitely would have beaten Butler. I don't know about Duke. I mean, Duke obviously won the title that year in a great game against Butler.
But imagine if Syracuse had played Duke in a national championship game prior to entering the ACC.
Right.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
And then you go into the ACC with a slight bit of a rivalry.
Well, yeah. That's a good point. I didn't think of it like that. I think of it more just in the Syracuse.
I'm a big picture guy.
You are. Syracuse was the best team in the country that year and at that time. And I don't think there's much doubt about that. You're right. Who knows in a one-game scenario what happens, and you can't assume they would have won, but for the sake of this argument, I will say that I feel pretty confident that they certainly would have gone to the Final Four that year. I think we would all agree on that.
Yes.
Whether or not they win a national title, that remains to be seen. But I would have liked to see how that year finished out with Arinze on the floor.
315-437-7644 if you'd like to partake in this idea we stole from the Marshall Street podcast.
Jordan had chimed in and said, one of the popular answers to this question on Twitter was the Keith Smart shot. If that doesn't go in, or if
DC makes,
I was going to say if Derek Coleman makes the 1-1. Now again, how does that change history? If Jim Boeheim gets number 1 in '87, does he finish with multiple? You would assume he would have finished with multiple. But is it more than 2? Is it 3 or 4? Who knows? That's why we're talking about this. But that is a great example of if DC makes those free throws or Keith Smart doesn't make that shot. How does that change history?
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with mine. I think the Coach P one more year, because what if he pulls out another great season in that situation? I got to look at that schedule.
You're talking about the following year, the one that started with West Virginia.
I mean, I would have hoped they would have put up more points in that game
than one score.
Yeah. It's
interesting that you go to a football-related topic
because it and this is no offense to Greg Robinson, but it ruined the basketball program's still okay. The football program is irrelevant.
Yeah, I guess I look at it. And your example is a good one. I'm just saying it's interesting that you immediately go to football, because I go to basketball in terms of they got one title, but could they have 3 or 4 by now? If a certain thing goes, breaks their way here and there.
They don't lose to Richmond. Another football one is I don't think it affects anything whatsoever on the undefeated season. What if Pat Dye had gone for it? That doesn't change the season at all. You're not national champs if you win.
Yeah, it doesn't change history. I don't think.
You're what, third? What did they finish that year?
They were 4th going into the game.
So you finish in the same spot basically.
Now you have me wondering where they finished. They finished 4th in the final poll.
Yeah. So what do they move up one spot if they win?
Maybe.
Or 2, you end up 2nd in the standings. You want to go to the phones? This might be the earliest Scooter's ever called in.
Do we know who this is?
Yes, Scooter.
It's Scooter. Okay.
Yeah, and we've got other calls.
All right, Scooter
coming
in Janesville, kicking us off on the show. Hey, Scooter.
Yeah, first of all, Steve, I know you guys are busy today, but I had a couple of things maybe to help you. Thanks for your back. I'll do it later in the week, but these are simple things, not stuff that you have to go to get, go to the gym or stuff. Anyway, the Paul Pascarella thing, to me, you hear the nerve when you guys are talking about what if, give him another year. The reason why they brought him back is they gave him a couple years. Remember, he had to take over the offense. The offense was last, I think, in everything. Passing yards, total yards. You're playing a perfect weather condition. People forget that George Stilier was not the offensive coordinator when we went to the BCS Bowls. He went 1 year to San Diego, and he came back as the defensive coordinator. So the 2 years that we had an offense that was good enough to go to BCS, he had nothing to do with it. And the bottom line is, the point was, when we hired Robinson, it was almost like we had an offensive guy. It was almost a clone. We hired a defensive guy without any head coaching experience, and you're going to bring in an offensive coordinator named Brian Periani that had no offensive coordinator stuff. Now, we were told that Norm Chow, who was the offensive coordinator for USC when they're winning their national titles and they had their Heisman Trophy candidates, everybody asked about Norm Chow. We were told by Darryl Gross, he won't leave California. There's no reason. Well, you know what? He was upset because he wanted to be a head coach. He left USC. He was on cold pizza, basically promoting that I have to go somewhere to be a head coach. He ends up being the offensive coordinator for the Titans, Tennessee Titans. But he would have come here. Now, maybe he has the same record, but he was brought an offensive flavor to it. So at least we're trying to help the offense, not the defense. But, we were dead last the last couple of years in pass colonies for the offense. And the short side option just got to be a joke because we kind of don't know what they're going to run on third down. So he had his years at the end of his thing. So it was the wrong hire. I think that's what killed Syracuse more than letting Paul Pascarella come back.
Well, they put him in a bad. They should have gone one more year. With
okay,
Coach
that's your okay. We can agree and disagree, Paulie, because he was brought back because of that year.
Now look, he finished 6-6. He got beat by what? That Georgia Tech team crushed them in the bowl game, and that's what did it. You got no bowl games for the next 5 years, right?
There was a 5-way tie for first place. Everything was down by points. I think Pittsburgh went and got killed by Utah in the Fiesta Bowl, but we tied for first place that year. It was just everybody had a 6-6 record that year.
Yeah, and appreciate you checking in, Scooter. I mean, Scooter's right in that it's not like it was, a sudden thing. I mean, it was a slow decline. Like McNabb left, and then they go 7-5. 6-5, had the year in 2001, which we've referred to so many times with Dwight
There's
Freeney.
Something else you're leaving about this,
and then they go 4-8, 6-6, 6-6.
There's something else we're leaving out about this. The player who caused Rutgers to become good decommitted from Syracuse in Ray Rice.
That's another element to this, no doubt.
Because Coach P got fired.
Yeah, that is another element to this. Yeah.
And then you look at that next year's schedule. Does Coach P lose to West Virginia? Maybe. The only win they had was against Buffalo. He probably beats Virginia. He
lost to UConn that year.
He probably beats UConn. He probably beats Rutgers. South Florida. They probably have another 6-6 year, and then you get rid of them prior to a bowl game or not a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. You bring up the Ray Rice thing, and that's what we have the benefit of hindsight, as you said, and at the time maybe you didn't. It was a calculated risk. Maybe you didn't know for sure that was going to happen, but it happened. They decided to go, outside the family, and then you saw too, like doors that were open in the recruiting world in New York and New Jersey and tri-state areas. All of a sudden, they start to close on Greg Robinson, and it obviously set the program back years.
Sport Boy and I had the same thought. I'm just looking down. He had the same thought that they lost the recruiting battle too when they did that.
No doubt. I mean, there is no doubt about that. But it wasn't like Dr. Gross came in and was just like, I'm just going to make a change for the sake of making a change. Things had gotten stale. There was, a faction of the fan base that was like, I'm over this. It was, again, 4-8, 6-6, 6-6, sub 500 for 3 years. And again, since McNabb left, I mean, they were in a 6-year rut where they had one good year in 6 years after McNabb left. So it was a difficult decision. I agree with you. I think they mishandled it, and it certainly set the program back. Let's get another phone call in. We've got John in Syracuse next up on the show. Hey, John.
Hi, man. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good. How's Batman's back?
It is better than yesterday. I appreciate you asking. It's we're not at 100% yet, John. We're operating at about 70%, but we're better than we were yesterday.
Good. Probably the biggest thing in my mind's eye that sets the football program back is Michael Vick not being Don McNabb. he would have came, the continuity would have just kept on keeping on.
That was a tough one. I've actually had private conversation with Coach P about that, and that it literally turned recruiting upside down.
And we would never have fallen into this morass.
Yeah, there's no website called Troy Nunes is an absolute magician. If Michael Vick comes here,
might have been Michael Vick is an absolute magician. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Appreciate you checking in, John.
That was a tough one. That is one of the shadiest recruiting things ever. When the governor gets involved and money's definitely trading hands to get a kid.
Now it's all above the table, right?
Yeah.
Back then it wasn't. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's got to be. I think that's top 5. I don't think there's any doubt about that in terms of these what ifs. Let's get one more in this segment, and then we'll keep those phone calls coming. We've got Chuck in North Syracuse up next on the show. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, the obvious one for me is what if Carmelo Anthony stayed for another year or two? Could have had back-to-back national championships, maybe.
Yeah, and as the stories have gone. He wanted to. And Jim Boeheim said, no, come on. You're going to be a top 3 pick. You got to go.
I always think of that, too, because what if they don't win the next year? Right?
Does it hurt his stock? Is that what you mean?
No, but it ruins the mojo of it. Like the luster of it. He came in, he got him the ship and left. If he comes back and they lose in the Sweet 16 the next year.
The only thing I would say to that is, did it ruin the luster with the Fab Five that they stayed together as long as they did? I mean, they're making documentaries about them, and I know they didn't win, but yeah, I mean, the Fab Five was, whether they won or lost, they were like the Beatles. I mean, that would have been a cool thing for this town and for Syracuse basketball. But
the Fab Three would have stayed together.
I mean, how cool would that have been? So, yeah, I mean, the Fab Five, I mean, there's so many stories about them and just the twists and turns with their relationship. And even though they didn't win it, it's still a fascinating story to tell. So I don't know if it would have – you're saying it would have taken some of the luster away from 2003?
No, I'm just saying it would have – I think if he had lost in an early round of a tournament the next year, it would have kind of – would that stick in people's heads? Like, oh, man.
I think it goes back to that conversation we were having a couple weeks ago about it's really hard to win a championship.
Yeah. It also goes to the people that want him to play in the TBT. There's nothing good that would come from that.
No.
So yeah,
because you either win it and it's like you're a ringer, or you don't win it. It's like, how did Carmelo not win it?
Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing with that. He did the right thing.
Yeah, no, he did do the right thing. But it's fun to think about. That's why we're doing this. What if? What if Coach P had stayed? What if? Arinze doesn't get hurt. What if Carmelo comes back? We want to know what your what if is. 315-437-7644. We're going to take our first time out. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.
Neville Precision Plumbing and Heating.